but we all know that the economic prosperity hasn't been seen around all neighborhoods.
Building a better land by bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Cleveland's future is being formed right now. This week through Cleveland Rising, our community is having candid conversations about race. So News 5's Kevin Barry is going in depth all week, asking if our current course is really building a better land for everyone. As new expensive apartments change downtown skyline to house a quickly growing population, and while business leaders prime the city to be a hub for technology companies and sculpt a new look for the city. Tonight, he explains how nearly 1,000 people are trying to figure out how all people can benefit from Cleveland's success.
The Cleveland Rising Summit started today, looking to have hard conversations around racial equity in Cleveland. The goal is to imagine what the city might look like in 2030 and then do what it takes to make that a reality.
You need to be having conversations like this more consistently.
Chardonnay Graham was brought into Cleveland Rising to make sure a wide range of voices would be heard, especially about racial equity in Cleveland.
The objective is to, again, come together, have these conversations, and get to the root of the issue.
Summit co-chair Felton Thomas says that's especially important while Cleveland looks to continue its revitalization in the next decade.
But we all know that the economic prosperity hasn't been seen around all neighborhoods.
To shape the conversation, Cleveland Rising held a series of input sessions in September focused around how the region could achieve its potential. Common themes: safer communities, better transportation, and better public education.
Nobody's going to be surprised by these areas.
Dr. Ronald Fry from Case Western Reserve University's Business School has been advising the summit. He says the key is the way these conversations will happen. Dr. Fry co-created an approach called appreciative inquiry, which creates a change in an organization or community by talking about how it's found success before.
You actually start by kind of re-looking at the past through this lens of when we were able to be at our best or when we were most successful, what helped that happen.
After that, the summit will split into working groups, trying to make the ideas into reality. Dr. Fry says we'll know if the summit and its approach worked by the energy and widespread collaboration he hopes emerges after.
That 1 + 1 doesn't just equal 2, it equals 3 or 4 or 5. We just believe there's so much possibility there, but we have to find it together.
The key is making sure a wide range of people from different networks and backgrounds are all at the table.
I've seen the word inclusion used more in the last 90 days than I think I've seen in my entire life.
Cleveland NAACP President Danielle Sidnor says she was part of the early meetings about the summit. Success in her eyes will come when Greater Cleveland is more intentional about making sure everyone benefits from the region's success. But this is a start. Tomorrow we take a look at the exploding downtown in Cleveland, but we also find the people who feel left behind. In Cleveland, I'm Kevin Barry, News 5.
Well, this week, 1,000 people from different backgrounds are all coming together for Cleveland Rising. Their goal is to have candid conversations about race and figure out how all people in all parts of the city can share in Cleveland's future success. This comes while business leaders build up the city to be a hub for technology companies while sculpting a new look for the city of the future. We're exploring those topics all week, but tonight, the dark side to development, because some of us are being left behind. News 5's Kevin Barry explains the key to our region's success might be spreading the construction boom downtown into nearby neighborhoods, as long as it's done in the right way.
Cranes are in the skyline in Cleveland, putting up new apartments. New construction is a sign of economic vitality, but Cleveland's downtown boom signifies a success that isn't always spread equally across our region.
Even just in my 2 years here, I've seen downtown become the it spot.
But Parrish Purnell says as new apartments open up and rent rises, people like him are being left behind.
Who can afford $1,500 to $2,000 a month rent when you are paying off your student loans and you don't have a job that is paying you $70,000, a year?
Parrish moved to the region about 2 years ago and works downtown, but lives with his in-laws in a nearby suburb to save money, because at this point in his career,
living at a homes downtown or even upscale living it's just, it's not attainable.
So while Northeast Ohio prepares for the next 20 years, Cecil Lipscomb at the United Black Fund says it's important to understand the positives with the negatives. His organization helps fund workforce development and education projects all around Greater Cleveland, and his office is right across the street from one of those luxury apartments Parrish and many other people just can't afford.
We're proud of it for the whole region, right? But there is a feeling that in some cases that's another community's project.
A community with more money for higher rent, driving working class people out of the city.
Now what we're seeing is that sort of next wave that you mentioned.
Kent State's Terry Schwartz says we're already seeing it because Cleveland has communities that are geographically close, but economically worlds apart.
It creates these kind of jarring moments of, pockets of strength and pockets, kind of that really need support and need help.
And it's seen firsthand by the people benefiting from the boom.
It's been a successful model with the rebuilding of downtown.
Arian Kirkpatrick's The AKA Team Construction Company is working on luxury apartments on the 9th Street Pier. She says the lack of affordable housing pops up in many of Cleveland's communities, including its communities of color. So in the coming years, she'd like to see downtown success spread.
We need to take the model that we have been successful with downtown Cleveland and take them to the Fairfax area, take them to the St. Clair area.
But Schwartz says this is still a region that needs financial incentives to make development happen.
We're not at the point where anything is a done deal.
It takes many layers of tax credits to help the boom downtown, and opportunity zones are now giving incentives for development in low-income areas like Glenville, Collinwood, and Kinsman. Cleveland NAACP President Danielle Sidnor says while those places now at least have a higher chance of investment, there are still challenges.
The concern, though, is the opportunity zone investors generally are not coming from the communities in the neighborhoods.
Sidnor says new construction has to be careful not to kick out people who have been living in these communities sometimes for decades. So tomorrow, we'll look at how some solutions may be found simply in how a city is laid out. In Cleveland, I'm Kevin Barry, News 5. Cars may pass outside Friedrich Bicycle, but inside.
I gave up my car about 16 years ago, and just switched to bicycles.
Tallis Monroe works on the only type of vehicle he chooses. Tallis rides to the Ohio City shop 15 miles one way from his home in Euclid. A lot of that commute is on big downtown avenues like Superior, where Tallis says he has at least one close call every week.
I start getting shaken when the near-death experiences go to 4 or 5. And I'm talking inches.
He's not alone.
I think overly wide roads really encourage speeding.
Jacob Van Sickle leads the cycling advocacy group Bike Cleveland, which pushes to connect existing bike lanes and trails as well as build more. Cleveland has tried. It passed a Green Streets law back in 2011, which led to about 80 new miles of bike lanes and trails. But Jacob says it should have been even more.
But we also see a lot of streets where there have been missed opportunities, where we feel like the ordinance should have applied. Streets like East 9th Street, streets like East 55th or Woodland.
Councilman Matt Zone is trying.
I've seen over the past 2 years, minds really change inside of City Hall.
Right now, his colleague, Councilman Kerry McCormick, is beefing up the existing Green Streets laws. Zone is heading up Cleveland's Vision Zero task force, which is trying to change the way the city designs its roads to prevent more than 200 serious injuries and deaths every year.
More than 90% of those happen on less than 10% of our streets. And the majority of those streets are in low-income communities and communities of color.
Those communities make up a lot of the business for bike shops like Friedrich's.
There's a lot of low-income people who rely upon their bicycles to get places.
When commuting is a challenge or dangerous, NAACP President Danielle Sidnor says it can hold everyone back.
Then you tend to stay in low-wage paying jobs that are more service-based.
The solution might be found in an ambitious project called the Cleveland Midway.
It's really about building a green space in the middle of the road for people to bike and walk down.
The Midway will give 2 lanes protected by plants and barriers to bikes, runners, walkers, and scooters right down the center of Superior Avenue. Kent State's Urban Design Collaborative Director Terry Schwartz says it fits well on Superior because the street is so large.
I love the Midway project, particularly because it's taking a disadvantage and turning it into an advantage.
It'll run from Public Square all the way to East 55th Street, helping communities far outside downtown.
Where the Midway is proposed to run would actually serve some of the lowest income neighborhoods in the city,
Potentially making it easier to expand commutes and career opportunities for people who live there without adding a car.
Cleveland's future is being formed right now. And all week we've been looking at how we can build a better land for that future by making sure everyone in all parts of our city benefit. It comes as 1,000 people gather for Cleveland Rising to have candid conversations about race and changes to come in the next decade. And while new apartments change downtown skyline to house a quickly growing population, not all can afford them. So the city is looking at new street designs to help people more easily travel between neighborhoods. At the same time, there's a call for business leaders to get outside their comfort zone and to make sure the workforce reflects the community. Because as News 5's Kevin Barry explains, they just might find the perfect match for their company.
An economic driver of a city is often its business community, but in Cleveland, companies are having a hard time finding employees, especially employees that reflect the communities they work in. The work Parrish Purnell does now as a communications specialist at a downtown Cleveland nonprofit is the job he was looking for when he moved to Cleveland about 2 years ago. His first jobs were not.
I'll be honest, I hated it.
Parrish worked as a youth sports coach, even a parking valet.
I spent nights on end until 4 a.m. just applying, trying to revamp my resume.
Eventually, networking led him to his job at the Council for Economic Opportunities in Greater Cleveland. Even if it didn't seem like it to Parrish, Cleveland employers in many industries are struggling to find employees. Employers like Eddie Taylor, who founded the insurance company Taylor Oswald.
Folks aren't able to find, hire, attract the kind of talent that's needed for the jobs and the availability they have within their workforce.
It's a similar problem a few blocks away at Performex, where Chris Beck leads one of the fastest growing tech startups in the city.
10 years ago, a lot of the really good engineers that were coming out of colleges in the Midwest, they went to Silicon Valley because that's where the jobs were, that's where the exciting businesses are.
She says now that's changing, but slowly. Since it's cheaper to work in the Midwest than in Silicon Valley, more tech startups are popping up around Northeast Ohio, so there's more talent that's available to hire. Still, Beck says the whole industry struggles with diversity.
It's definitely a problem in tech nationally.
The fact that Chris is a female and a tech CEO is pretty unique in and of itself, but Performex is still working to hire its first employee of color. In Cleveland, that's not uncommon.
Sometimes we haven't been at the table, and when I say we, I mean black and brown folks.
Business owners like Arian Kirkpatrick say people of color can be cut out of the workforce because professional networks in Cleveland can be just as segregated as the neighborhoods.
We're always talking about not having access to capital, but really here in Cleveland, we haven't had access to knowledge. We haven't had access to exposure.
Focusing on increasing diversity is a start for Cleveland companies, but Taylor says making the workplace more diverse needs to be intentional and big.
Bold, forward-looking, demanding, and in some ways adventurous behavior has to also kick in, but an emphasis on bold.
Bold, like making a conscious effort to not only hire minorities, but also do business with minority-owned companies.
Not the standard percentage which shows that they have a program, but standards which are elevated, numbers which are elevated beyond what might even be comfortable for some of these companies.
Eddie says when a company's executives set the example, they can change the culture throughout their entire organization. He says doing right by the community and turning a profit are not mutually exclusive, and companies can grow when they do right by everybody.
That kind of boldness is still on the horizon, let's say.
In Cleveland, I'm Kevin Barry.